This is the story of Princess Elara Whitmore, the royal daughter who risked everything for love, for freedom, and for the truth that nearly destroyed her kingdom. Thunder cracks, the sound of distant rain. In the heart of Avelon, where sunlight kissed every tower and the rivers carried whispers of legend, there lived a princess bound by more than her crown. Her name was Elara Whitmore, daughter of King Richard Whitmore, ruler of the realm, a man both loved and feared. Avelon was a kingdom of beauty and illusion. From the marble spires of the citadel to the golden banners that fluttered above the city square, everything gleamed with perfection. Yet beneath that gleam, the kingdom was rotting. Its people whispered of hunger and heavy taxes. But those whispers never reached the palace walls, or so the king believed. Elara had grown up behind those walls, her world painted in silks and ceremony. Every step she took was guided, every word she spoke rehearsed. From the moment she could walk, she was taught how to bow, how to smile, how to please. They called it royal grace. But to her, it felt like a cage made of gold. Her father adored her in his own way. He saw in her the future of Avelon, obedient, flawless, loyal to the throne. Yet the more he tried to perfect her, the more she felt herself slipping away. At dawn, she would stand at her balcony, watching the city below awaken. Children ran barefoot through the cobbled streets, merchants opened their stalls, and guards marched to their posts. To Elara, those moments were precious. They reminded her that beyond the palace gates, there was a world she had never touched. One morning, she dared to ask her father, "Father, why do the gates stay locked if our people are free?" The king looked at her for a long moment, his eyes cold but composed. "Freedom," he said, "is a gift best handled by those who can afford it. You, my daughter, were not born to question the walls that protect you, but to rule within them." That night, Elara could not sleep. The moonlight spilled across her chamber floor, and she found herself tracing the patterns in the marble tiles, wondering if there was any truth beyond what she'd been taught. Days turned into weeks, and her curiosity grew restless. When the royal tutor read from the old chronicles of Avelon, Elara noticed gaps, pieces of history conveniently missing. When she asked about them, her tutor would bow and change the subject. Something was being hidden. One evening, while wandering through the palace library, Elara discovered a sealed section, a wing no servant dared enter. The door was locked, bound by iron chains. Yet the princess, clever and quietly defiant, had learned a thing or two from the guards. She picked the lock with the tip of her jeweled hairpin. Inside, the air was thick with dust and forgotten memory. Shelves towered above her, filled with scrolls so old they crumbled at her touch. And there, half buried beneath a fallen tapestry, she found it, a worn leather-bound journal with the royal crest carved upon it. It belonged to Queen Seraphine Whitmore, her late mother. Elara sat beneath the flickering torchlight, opening the journal with trembling hands. The pages told of a queen unlike any other, brave, wise, beloved by her people. But as Elara read on, the words darkened. Her mother had spoken of a truth hidden beneath the crown, of a rebellion crushed, of a secret that could unravel the throne itself. Alara's heart raced. Her mother's last words, written in fading ink, read, "To be silent is to die unseen. To speak is to live, though the world may burn." A gust of wind blew through the open window, snuffing out the candle beside her. In that moment, Elara felt it, the first spark of rebellion. From that night, the princess began to change. She listened differently, spoke carefully, watched everything. She noticed the fear in the servants' eyes, the sorrow of the townsfolk glimpsed from her balcony. Her golden cage no longer seemed beautiful, it felt suffocating. The king, unaware of the storm he had birthed, continued his reign with an iron hand. But in the shadows of the palace, his daughter began to awaken. Her rebellion did not start with a sword. It began with a question, and a promise whispered beneath her breath. "If truth is forbidden, then I will find it, even if it destroys me." Night in the royal palace, quiet, suffocating. But on this night, it carried footsteps, soft, deliberate, forbidden. Princess Elara moved like a shadow through the corridors she had known all her life. But tonight, they felt strange, alive, whispering warnings through every flickering torchlight. Her silk gown brushed against the stone walls, pale and ghostlike. Beneath her cloak, she carried the worn journal of her mother, the only truth she trusted now. She had heard rumors. whispers among the servants about prisoners kept in the lower cells, men accused of treason. And among them, one name kept returning like an echo through the halls: Captain James Hale, once the pride of the royal army, now branded a traitor. His crime, refusing the king's command to burn an innocent village said to shelter fugitives. That night, Elara followed her heart instead of her orders. The stairway to the dungeons was steep and cold, carved into the belly of the palace itself. As she descended, the air thickened with damp and darkness. A torch flickered in her trembling hand. Her pulse thundered in her ears. When she reached the final cell, she saw him. He sat chained to the wall, bruised, weary, but unbroken. His uniform was torn, his hair disheveled, and yet there was something fierce in his eyes. Green and alive, like the last light before a storm, Elara stood still, watching him from behind the bars. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words in that place were dangerous things. But when she finally found her voice, it trembled like the flame in her hand. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Defying the king?" He lifted his head, studying her through the shadows. Then, with a faint, tired smile, he said, "Only that I didn't do more." Something in her chest shifted. A crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Elara brought him bread that night, water the second. By the third, she brought questions. And by the fourth, hope. They spoke in whispers, about honor, about duty, about the price of silence. James told her of the soldiers who had died refusing unjust orders, and of how the king's council, led by Lord Grey, had twisted every truth into treason. There, between stone and shadow, two souls from opposite worlds found the same ache, the longing to be free. But nothing in Avelon stayed hidden for long. Unbeknownst to them, Lord Grey, the king's most trusted advisor, had been watching. A man of cold intellect and colder ambition, Grey had served the Whitmore line for decades, but loyalty like gold dulls under greed. He had followed Elara one night, silently descending the stairway, his boots muffled by the weight of treachery. And there, in the half-light of the dungeon, he saw it, the impossible. The princess and the prisoner, the crown and the condemned, together. To him, it was not love, it was leverage. That dawn, his voice slithered into the king's ear. "Your Majesty," he murmured, "your daughter has been seen in the dungeons with the traitor." The king's fury shook the walls of the palace. His voice roared like thunder through the marble halls. "She would not. My daughter, my Elara, she would never shame this throne." But when Elara was brought before him, surrounded by guards and silence, she did not weep nor tremble. She stood tall, pale, defiant, unafraid. "Is it true?" the king demanded. "Do you deny this madness?" Elara looked at her father, the man she had once adored, now a stranger hidden behind power and fear, and with a voice steady as steel, she said, "No, I do not deny it. I love him." Gasps filled the throne room like a storm of knives. The king's face went ashen, his hands trembling upon his sword. In that single moment, the perfect daughter became a disgrace. He turned away from her, his voice breaking as he gave the order no father should ever speak. "Take her away, both of them, until I decide their fate." They dragged her from the court as the banners trembled above. The palace, once her home, now looked at her with cold, accusing eyes. In the dungeons once more, she found herself beside James, no longer a visitor, but a prisoner. He tried to speak, to tell her he'd take the blame, that he'd rather die alone than see her suffer. But she silenced him with a look, not of fear, but of fierce, aching devotion. "No," she whispered. "They can chain us, but they cannot unmake what we found. Some love stories burn like candles, others like firestorms. Theirs was both." Lord Grey in his chambers above smiled as he watched the kingdom unravel. He had wanted power, and now, through chaos, it would come. The king's heart was broken, his people divided, his council poisoned by suspicion. But even as Grey celebrated his triumph, fate began to turn its wheel. Because in the darkest cells of the palace, a promise had been made, a vow whispered between two hearts bound by love and defiance. "If truth still lives," Elara vowed, "then I will find it. And when I do, the crown will remember who it truly serves." And though chains bound her wrists, freedom had already taken root in her heart. Soft violin swells, fade out as torchlight flickers across the dungeon walls. The storm was coming, and when it arrived, it would not spare a single soul in Avelon. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. More tales of love, power, and destiny await you.